Hello everyone, welcome. My name is Zainab and I'm the Civic and Advocacy Manager here at IATA Leads. And today we're starting an important journey, a training session that's designed to truly help you understand your rights and how to step up as an effective ally. In this session today, we'll cover two critical pieces: know your rights, what's your legal and civil rights are and how they matter, and how to actually recognize when they're being challenged. And then the other piece is ally roles. What it means to be an ally, how you can support others and yourself, and the actions you can take to make a meaningful change. Being an ally isn't just about a good intention, it's about reflection, understanding privilege, and actually taking a thoughtful action. So today's training, we're gonna dig deeper into all those things that I just mentioned. But if you have any questions throughout the PowerPoint, throughout the presentation, please leave them in the comment. Please email. I'll put my email at the end of this PowerPoint as well. A little bit about sort of what we're going to cover. I mentioned a little earlier who we are. Will kind of give you guys a quick introduction of who we are as an organization. Talk a little bit about the climate, the current climate, political climate we're in right now. Obviously, outlining your critical or crucial know your rights. We'll talk a little bit about information, obviously, for immigrants. We know that power is a knowledge. Knowledge is a power, I guess I should say. And then we'll talk about, obviously, like I said, the role of an ally. The really there are a lot of things that we'll cover within that. How do you document ICE interaction, continuing support for immigrant communities members, and then kind of end the PowerPoint with the current Minnesota legislature that's related to immigrant policies, just so that you have an idea of what that looks like and sort of the rights you have here in the states, not federally. And then obviously we'll do kind of a reflection, and at the end of the PowerPoint, I'll have resources that will really help you and help a lot of communities, right? Where do you find some of those resources? How do you get access to that? And then a Q&A at the end. I will put my email at the end of this PowerPoint so that if anybody who's watching this PowerPoint has any questions, they can email me. Moving on to the next slide, who are we? Who is IATA Leads? I feel like a lot of people have never heard IATA Leads. Maybe they have, came across. Who is IATA Leads? IATA Leads was founded in 2015. We're a nonprofit organization that trains and empowers the African diaspora women. Our mission is really to equip women and to equip new Americans, particularly the African diaspora women, to excel in leadership positions in their communities across the spectrum of societal influence, right? There's so many programs that we do here in IATA Leads. We have a campaign school that we do throughout the summer where we train women, where we train a woman to who wanna one day wanna run for office. They're not sure they want, but they still have that idea at the back of their mind. So we have a campaign school. Well, we also have a leadership program that really includes a ton of, that includes obviously the campaign school. Will includes the mentorship program for college students. We have different type of training. Know your rights training is something that we started recently, given the incident that happened in our state and across the country as well. So we have a lot of different trainings and programs that we do here at IATA Leads. So that's a little bit about the organization, sort of what we do. Let's do a quick check-in about our current climate, right? We know that some of the things that has been happening, especially if you live in the Minneapolis Twin City area, obviously. So it is, I think, really important to really understand what's happening locally, right? What are some of the ICE activities, right? I think it's always really good to know some of those things, right? What are some of the police stops, surveillance, legal policy shifts, right? Obviously, there's going to be a lot given our current political climate that we're in right now, right? And really understanding sort of the intersection between all that. So this is this training was also designed to be in person, and so one of the questions that I always ask for when we host these kind of trainings in person are what fear or experiences have people you've seen or the communities you've been around, what have you heard from those communities, right? I think that is something that is widely shared among a lot of people in different communities, right? They've heard from their friends or their relative that there has been not necessarily an ICE arrest, but also sort of a chatter about maybe there are folks who are pretending to be a cop, not necessarily cop, but like trying to sort of be the kind of undercover because we've seen it a lot where ICE is trying to pretend or be undercover, quote unquote undercover in a lot of these places and go to a lot of these communities. So things like that. And there has been a fear, obviously, among a lot of communities here in our city and our state. Obviously, a check-in about continuing to check in. I think is really important. These times are very, very, very stressful and predictable times. So I think it's really, really important to be positive, be empowering, right? Be spaces that are welcoming, but also take care of yourself, right? Mentally, physically, take care of your family, take care of your relatives, right? There's a quote that I love that says you can't pour from an empty cup, right? So you really have to take care of yourself because these are really hard times, especially those communities. Um, Legal disclaimer, this is something that we have to say obviously because we're not lawyers, right? We're not lawyers. We are just educating our communities because we think this is an important thing for our communities to know. So just we're not lawyers, right? We're not lawyers. I feel like I have to say that, right? um, who has rights here in the US? I think a lot of people sort of have this idea, sort of thing, my sort of like, okay, you have to be, if you have to be a US citizen in order for you to have a right, or you can only have a right if you're a US citizen. That's not the case. Every person within the US has some basic rights regardless of their immigration status. So that is something that I always tell people you have a right regardless of your immigration status. You have some basic rights here in the U.S. regardless of your immigration status. So I think that's something that we need to understand and know that. What are those rights, right? Now that we know that we have some basic rights regardless of your immigration status, what are those rights, right? Let's look at the fourth, the fifth, and the sixth amendment. See what that says. So obviously, Fourth Amendment says ICE and police cannot enter a person's home without a permission, right? It also says that ICE requires a warrant signed by a judge. A lot of times we've heard stories where ICE will hand out a warrant that is not signed by a judge, that is not signed, again, the keyword being has to be signed by a judge, not Department of Homeland Security, not the leadership of DHS. It has to be signed by a judge, by a federal judge, right? That being the keyword. So a lot of times, make sure that you're reading these warrant that they're giving to you, right? Um, so that is the Fourth Amendment, right? Fourth Amendment tells you that they cannot enter your house, and a warrant has to be signed by a judge. The Fifth Amendment is all about you. It's all about remaining silent. It's all about the right to remain silent and due process of law, right? You can refuse to sign a document. That is your right. You can also refuse to give documents as well. So that is the Fifth Amendment. So that is something that I think is so 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 important. And I think if you could take away one thing from this training and this presentation today is to remain silent. To remain silent. To remain silent. The Sixth Amendment talks about the right to lawyer and the right to legal counsel. It also, obviously talks about right to be advised on a criminal and immigration case consequences, right? So the fourth, like quick summary, Fourth Amendment said ICE cannot enter your room, your house. Warrant has to be signed by a judge. Fifth Amendment says you have the right to remain silent and due process of law. You can refuse to sign a document. You can refuse to give a document. The Sixth Amendment says you have a right to a lawyer or legal counsel. Why do we remain silent, right? In the last slide I said, if you could take away from one thing from this PowerPoint, is to remain silent. Why is it important to remain silent, right? ICE can only deport someone if they have an evidence that they're not US citizen. If they can prove, if they have an actual evidence that you're not US citizen, that is the only way. So do not provide evidences by answering questions or sharing documents. By you talking to ICE, by you actually speaking to them, you're giving the right, you're giving evidence, right? You're sharing information to them, right? So you're kind of handing yourself to them, if that makes sense. Do not disclose birthplaces, a country of origin, where you came from, where your family's from, your nationality, nothing, right? It's also important, like I said, to invoke the Fifth Amendment when speaking to ICE, right? Again, the Fifth Amendment was the right to remain silent. You can always say, I invoke my Fifth Amendment. I invoke my right to remain silent, right? They're gonna ask you questions like, where are you from? Where were you born? What is your nationality? When did you get to this country? How did you get to? They're gonna ask you this kind of question. Say, I invoke my right to remain silent. I invoke my right to remain silent. What to do when ICE is outside of your door, right? What do? Right? They're outside, they're knocking your door. What do? Keep the door closed. Do not open that door. ICE agents are not allowed to enter your house without a judicial signed warrant, without a judge signed warrant, right? They're gonna say, oh, we have a warrant. Ask them to slide under the door, right? If they claim that they have a warrant, I have them slide under the door, under a window to verify, right? To verify this, you have to make sure it says it's signed by a judge and the name of the specific person and location, right? So right, so that is one thing that you always need to verify, that it's signed by a federal judge and it has a specific name of the judge and the location. The second thing you want to do is you need to kind of recognize some of the tactics that they use, right? They might misrepresent themselves. For instance, they might say, we're a police, or we're asking to verify a car registration, or they try to manipulate you. They try to manipulate folks to so that you can give them a consent to enter their house. So try to understand their tactics, because they use a lot of tactics like this for a lot of communities. The other thing is to know your rights. You have a right to remain silent. You do not have to answer any question or share any personal information. You do not have to allow you do not have to allow entry without a proper document, right? That goes back to my first point, right? If they force their way in, because sometimes they might do, we've seen, right, we've heard stories, they might do, right? You can't really control if they force themselves, right? Do not physically resist. Do not resist. Stay calm and verbalize that you do not consent to their entry or any search, and that you wish to remain silent until a lawyer is present. After that whole encounter, document everything. And I'm going to talk about in the next few slides about documentation, what you should include those documents, sort of recording what takes place and all that. I'll touch on a little bit on that. But after that, document everything. Take photos of any of the damages, write down what happened while it's still fresh in your mind, record if you could. Documentation is going to be really, really, really important in this process. What to do, and then continuing, obviously a little bit summary. If ICE comes to my home, like I said, quick summary: exercise your right to remain silent, do not sign any document, remain calm, do not allow ICE to enter your house. If they try to resist, stay calm, do not resist, because they're going to try to push their way into the house. Try to not resist, try to stay calm. Slide a red card under the door and ask for a warrant signed by a judge. We'll talk about what the red card is at the end of in this PowerPoint. You contact a lawyer and you have a family member preparedness in place. We're going to also touch a little bit about what that includes. what is family preparedness plan, right? I think it is so important to have an idea of if anything like this were to happen, having a plan is always, I think, a really good idea, right? What does that include? What does that look like? Help outline the needs and wish that you have your children be in your absence. So if you have a kid, I think it's really important to have kind of a plan around that. Establishing sort of a clear action plan with sort of how do you access essential information, and then obviously your typical childcare important documentation. I think it's really important to always kind of be prepared and be 2 step ahead of everything in case anything like this were to happen. And then let's talk about what if I encounter ice in my community, right? You're walking one day, you're driving around, and you saw an ice encounter, or you saw an ice activities in your neighborhood. What do you do? Always, like I said, exercise your right to remain silent. Do not sign anything. I'm gonna repeat this again for the 80th time. do not sign anything. Remain calm. Always remain calm in situations like this. I know it is so hard to remain calm. To remain calm, do not consent to a search for your personal or your property stuff. If you're driving, that matter. Do not consent your car to be searched. If you're walking, you do not consent to be searched. Everyone should exercise their rights. If you're driving, um, obviously have your driver's license, have your documentation ready and stuff like that. Always ask if you're free to go. Always say, "Am I free to go, sir? Am I free to go, ma'am?" Like, always, "Am I free to go?" Right? Do not run. Obviously, this is I feel like self-explanatory. It's kind of do not run, do not speed, do not try to make the situation sort of so try to stay calm. I know it is hard a lot of times. And obviously never provide a false documentation to an ICE agent, obviously. And now let's talk about what to do if ICE comes to your work. Now we talked about home, we talked about community, in the community. Now let's talk about work. We have seen a prime example of this is what happened in Minneapolis in Lake Street, right? ICE agent coming to folks' workplaces. What do you do in that scenario? A staff should refuse to talk to ICE. Obviously, you're not. You can say something like, "You're not allowed to enter. You must speak to my employer." You know, ICE cannot enter a private area without your permission. Without, again, like I said, without a judge sign, excuse me, warrant. Do not give them a permission at all. If ICE enters without a permission, which a lot of times they will, do not interfere. Do not try to interfere with this with that. Do not try to um, just take notes. Just record the situation. Just take notes. Just take pictures as much as you can. I think documentation are going to be so important in this scenario. Avoid getting in sort of a group or lines that can be used as ground for detention. So try to, kind of clear the way, if that makes sense, while obviously exercising your rights. Um, in our communities, in our streets, obviously, this is a little bit of so you're always remain silent, ask if you're free to go, refuse to consent to search. Recording the interaction is going to be really important. Like I said earlier, if you're witnessing eyes engaging with someone, record. And then now let's kind of move to the ally portion of this PowerPoint. I think we're also going to come back, obviously, a little bit about, we'll touch on a little bit of resources and stuff like that. But now let's talk about the ally whole portion of it, right? We talked a little bit about it in the few slides back. Um, if you encounter as an ally, if you encounter an ICE checkpoint, ask them why they're stopping vehicles, why they're surging vehicles, why where detainees are being taken to. There are some of the questions that you should be sort of asking if you ever encounter things like this. If ICE requests an ID on bus or train or elsewhere, refuse to show, right? Ask them why they're there. Ask them what position, sort of position yourself between them and the undocumented folks that they're undocumented people. If ICE is outside of home, ask them who they're searching for and why. Um, request a warrant and remain others of their rights. I think remaining folks that they have rights that they do not need to say anything is, I think, really, 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 really crucial. If you see someone detained, what do you do? Ask them why, and where they're being transferred. Follow guidelines of recording the interaction. Obviously, always take a picture of the badge numbers, the light, the cars, the vehicles, license plate, the detail of the incident, including videos. Right, this is going to be really again important. Document ICE and local law enforcement the rules, right? This just might not be just ICE, but it might be also local law enforcement that are also unfortunately we've seen it that are also included in this sort of a raid. So always try to record, try to get their license plate, try to get their badge number if you can, without obviously being without interfering, you know, at all. Identify individual willing to risk to arrest to help stop the raid. I think that is something that we have. That is a risk, right? I wouldn't, that is a risk. So you just have to kind of take that into your consideration about that. Like I said, when documenting ICE arrest, film safely and transparently. Always film openly. You know, sort of say out loud that you're recording this so that folks know this. Focus on the officers and not the arrested, right? So center the footage on the ICE agent, sort of like their badge or when you're their vehicles, stuff like that, rather than actually recording the person that are being detained or the person that being arrested. Context really matter in this scenario, right? Capturing the mental details like the street sign, the landmark, the courthouse exterior, the clocks, things like that are going to be so important during during this documentation process. Obviously, respectful compliance if asked to step back. I might sometimes say, "Ma'am, sir, step back. Do not come near us." Always respect that. Always try to not interfere. Like I said, if ICE or law enforcement tells you to move back, do so. Film yourself, complying, right? Example, recording your own fee or resuming filming from the respectful distance if safe, right? Do not stop recording just because they're telling you to move back or just because they're telling you to, not uh, don't be anywhere near them. Don't stop recording, right? Do not stop recording. Pretend like, we say pretend like you're recording, something else, right? But also again, be respectful. Try to step back. You never wanted to, kind of get in the middle of that. So protect your device and footage. Obviously, this is your phone, your device. So secure your phone with a strong password. In the event that anything happens, avoid fingerprint or face unlock. These are less legality protected. Witnessing ICE interaction. Can you record? Yes. You have the right. You have the obviously you have the First Amendment, which says, the right to record law enforcement activities in public. However, do not interfere. Do not interfere with their actions, right? And I think this is where a lot of people kind of get arrested. We've seen it, right? Not all, but so just try to make sure you do not get interfered with their actions. Be aware that you're subject to further questioning. U.S. citizens and allies play a key role in supporting. Record, take notes. Record, take notes. Verifying ICE rate. Be aware. Obviously, a lot of people are gonna post social media about there's an ICE event happening. Always verify. Always verify. False rate on social media. In the event of witnessing what you think might be a raid, obviously take note of the date, location, time. Take photos, take videos. Make sure you verify this information. Make sure they're accurate, right? Remember, despite good intention, spreading false report can only do more harm. Continuing support for immigrant communities and members, understanding that these are a stressful and sometimes a traumatic times for a lot of communities and a lot of families. So be open to being, to listening and making spaces for them to really express how they feel, right? I think the best thing we can do for a lot of these communities is to really listen to them, right? Be familiar and confident with your role as an ally, right? What does that mean? Especially when interacting with us, right? Knowing where to direct for for immigrant resources. So I think really knowing there are some resources for certain immigrants and stuff like that. So knowing where those are going to be really crucial during this time. Obviously supporting immigrants that are own that have businesses and spaces. Take actions, right? Join a group that groups focus on immigrant rights and immigrant defense, whether it's directly or through policy. And it is okay not to have all the answers, right? You know, there are a lot of things that we don't know, and obviously with our current climate, political climate, so it's okay not to have all the answers. And then I know we're kind of close to wrapping up this PowerPoint today, this presentation. Let's talk a little bit about the current Minnesota legislation related to immigrant policies. Obviously, we have a three house sort of a policy or bills, and then we have the Senate one. The Senate one, the House Senate number 182. We've talked about, I'm going to read it, mandate that certain non-compliance license or identification card to be marked or establish limitation on their use as a valid identification for a specific service or benefit under Minnesota law. And then the three House bills, which are the House 10, prohibit the use of state-funded services to undocumented to undocumented or non-citizen, providing that undocumented and non-citizens are ineligible for Minnesota Care and North Star Promises Scholarship Program. And then the House 16 requires the cooperation of law enforcement with the immigration forces that the use of immigrant-related data is permitted, and county attorneys are mandated to inform immigration and immigrant in custody. And then the last House Bill 2058 talks about they eliminate the Office of the New Americans, which was established to promote the inclusive immigrants and refugees in Minnesota through various initiatives, and that were aimed to improving the economic mobility and civic participation and community. So those are sort of like some of the immigrant policies legislation that are currently in Minnesota. So I just wanted to folks kind of get an idea of what that looks like. Learn about your legal options. Obviously, the best resource I think that I have found, that we have found, are if you go to the Minnesota Legal Resource Center. There, I think really have such an amazing resources. Obviously some of those resources has multiple languages. Right, I think there's over 30, 40. Could be wrong, 20 maybe, but there are multiple. Don't quote me on the exact number, but there are multiple resources within that translated that has multiple languages. So I found that to be really good resources, and that's kind of where I direct people. In summary, just a quick summarize. If ICE comes to your home, do not open the door. Know your rights. Vulnerable individuals should have a family plan in place. Do not answer any ICE questions or any questions from ICE agents, record interaction or any arrest, remain others of their right, verify ICE read, only share confirmed information. And then normally when we do this trainings, like I said, in person, we have sort of a circle reflection that we really talk about, like, how do you feel? And sort of what is one word, to describe how you're feeling right now, and things like that. So please leave any, like, sort of by watching this PowerPoint, if there is one word that you could describe on how you're feeling, please leave that in the comment. Um, but yeah, I would love to hear that. So with that, we're kind of closing our PowerPoint. We have a virtual actual training coming up. So if anybody's watching this and they, wanted to, maybe, I guess, I don't know, want to come back and relearn this PowerPoint all over again, and we have a virtual option available that we're hosting the end of this month, so August 28th. Please go ahead and sort of scan the QR code that is on your screen to register that. Um, Please make sure you know if there are any community members, any groups that you think might be interested in. You can either send this link to this PowerPoint to them or have them join us virtually on that PowerPoint on that training. Resources, I think this is 42 languages. So the red card is available in 42 languages. If you go to this is the website that I kind of put it here. Go to that website. It has a ton of resources. Um, very, very helpful. I highly recommend. So definitely try to take advantage of the red card. Red card basically is a little piece of paper that has sort of like that basically says it's translated in 42 languages, and it basically says I do not consent to speak into eyes or do not consent to talk into an eyes. Um, and it's like a little red card that you slide under if they ever come eyes if ever eyes comes to your house. So I highly recommend to kind of have that resources that if you attend our virtual trainings, we send folks the actual red card. You know, I do follow up email, so they get all these resources via email. So if you're interested in actually getting these resources via email, please email me. I'll show my email on the next slide. But email me. I'll also send Know Your Rights, sort of a not necessarily this PowerPoint specifically, but a version of this PowerPoint, and then obviously immigrant have constitutional rights document that has it's like a one pager. So email me. I will pull my email on the next slide. But if you want to stay in touch with Ayana Leeds, all the great things that we are doing, please follow us on social media, Ayana Leads for all platforms. You can go to our website, ayanaleads.org /event if you want to check out all the events that we have coming up. So any questions, if you have any questions, any concern, maybe you think that, any ideas, any other trainings that you think could be helpful for other communities, any ideas that you have, please email me at Saynab, that's SAYNAB, at yadaleads.org. And I hope you guys enjoyed this PowerPoint, this presentation. And as always, if you have any questions, email me. If you want to attend our virtual training, which you'll be getting, if you come to our virtual training, you'll be getting an email that includes all the resources that I just mentioned. Like I said, I hope you guys have a great rest of your day.